Silence hung over the investigation until one detail, one overlooked connection, finally forced the entire case into a different light. What seemed at first like a straightforward search quickly cracked open a deeper story, one shaped by fractured family ties, missed cultural links, and relatives who held answers investigators didn't think to ask for. Right from the beginning, this case was pulling in signals, but no one recognized how much had been left unexplored. Before we move further into the findings, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on your bell so you get every update as this case continues to unfold. The disappearance of the children was supposed to be a matter of tracing their steps, questioning those closest to them, and reviewing the last moments anyone saw them. But the investigation immediately revealed something more complicated, a family structure that had slowly stretched across years and geography, thinning connections and leaving behind a trail of relatives who were once central figures but had drifted into the background. The children's story wasn't just about where they went. It was about how the people around them had lost touch with one another long before the search began. Investigators walking into the situation didn't just confront a missing person case. They walked into a history of disconnected branches, unresolved relationships, and cultural ties that had faded from the children's lives. Their Mi'kmaq heritage, a defining part of their identity through generations, had become something they hardly experienced. And that absence mattered. Indigenous communities are known for swift mobilization the moment a child is missing, for weaving networks across relatives, leaders, and elders who hold knowledge of the land, traditions, and family histories. But because the children had such limited contact with their heritage, few people within the community recognized them or felt connected enough to respond quickly. It was as though the children belonged to a culture that no longer knew their faces. This disconnect didn't erase their identity, but it did slow the very kind of support that might have given investigators an early advantage. In the midst of this, police found Malia's father in a way that highlighted just how many early opportunities had slipped through their fingers. They didn't locate him through family channels, community leads, or relative outreach. Instead, a simple parking ticket led them straight to him. Running his plate revealed his residence, a detail that should have been known long before paperwork connected the dots. That one administrative oversight demonstrated how incomplete the initial investigative map had been. If he had been contacted earlier, he could have provided immediate insight into the children's habits, their emotional states, and any recent changes. Instead, valuable time passed before a relative with first-hand understanding of the children's normal routines was even aware of the investigation. The discovery of the father through such an unexpected path raised an even more critical question. Who else had investigators missed? The answer came quickly when the grandfather finally spoke out and revealed he had never been contacted at all. He had been part of the children's upbringing, had shared holidays, routines, and daily life with them, and understood how the family had changed over the years. He wasn't someone who should have been an optional call. He should have been one of the first people investigators reached out to. His absence didn't just represent a missed conversation. It represented entire chapters of the family story that investigators didn't know existed. The early search could have benefited from his ability to trace patterns, identify shifts in relationships, and understand the deeper family dynamics that shaped the children's lives. According to him, the children were joyful, talkative, and deeply attached to their great-grandmother, who had cared for them during key stages of their childhood. Their early years were defined by lively conversations, routines built around home life, and a closeness that made them feel secure. But as a family structure changed, the frequency of those visits declined. The fragmentation meant that while he remembered their personalities vividly from earlier years, he had fewer recent memories that investigators could use to trace behavioral changes or emotional shifts. The children remained in his heart, but distance had limited the details he could provide, a consequence of a family spread thin long before the investigation began. This growing separation also meant the children spent less time within their cultural heritage. Their Mi'kmaq identity was something they inherited but seldom engaged with. They didn't attend community events, participate in cultural gatherings, or build relationships within indigenous circles. As a result, when news of their disappearance began circulating, the community response didn't spark in the powerful, immediate way it often does for culturally connected children. The lack of official tribal status added another barrier. Without enrollment records, the mechanisms that typically support indigenous missing child cases were slowed. People wanted to help, but they didn't have enough background or recognition to mobilize as quickly as they might have otherwise. Still, Despite the gaps, there were pieces of the children's story preserved in one place, within the grandmother's photo collections. Those images captured moments investigators would have otherwise overlooked: birthday parties, summer visits, extended stays with relatives, and small glimpses of the children at times when family life felt more stable. The photos told a story that contradicted the assumption that certain relatives were absent from their lives entirely. Instead, they revealed cycles of visitation, holidays celebrated together, and recurring patterns in their movement. These visual markers offered clarity about when the children had been with certain relatives and how often that contact occurred. The timeline became clearer, and investigators finally had a foundation for understanding the rhythms of the children's relationships. But perhaps the most surprising discovery came when Malia's updated indigenous status card surfaced. This wasn't a routine update, nor was it a minor administrative detail. It suggested a recent effort, whether by Malia herself or by someone close to her, to reconnect with Mi'kmaq identity. Renewing the card takes intention. It requires paperwork, identification, and often support from someone helping navigate the process. The question became, why was this update done now? Was Malia trying to reconnect with her cultural roots? Was someone guiding her towards stronger ties with her heritage? Or were there external pressures that prompted the renewal? Each possibility introduced a new investigative angle, and each one required deeper exploration to understand what had recently shifted in her life. The grandmother later shared an allegation that further complicated the emotional landscape of the investigation. Malia had reportedly confided that Daniel Martel restrained her and took her phone. This claim, whether fully verified or not, pointed investigators toward a potential pattern of control and fear. A child feeling confined or silenced cannot express distress freely, and that kind of environment limits their ability to reach out for help. The allegation raised serious questions about what the children were experiencing behind closed doors, whether they felt safe, and whether conflicts or restrictions contributed to the circumstances surrounding their disappearance. Even if the incident was isolated, it indicated a relationship dynamic that investigators could not ignore. Meanwhile, the broader issue of tribal enrollment continued to shape the community response. Because the children had Mi'kmaq heritage without official tribal status, there was no immediate alert through indigenous networks. These systems often rely on community familiarity, shared cultural identity, and formal documentation to trigger large-scale support. Without that official recognition, the children's disappearance didn't activate the rapid response mechanisms that might have spread awareness through indigenous circles quickly. Instead, their situation circulated slowly, reaching communities only after significant time had passed. All of these pieces, overlooked family ties, uncontacted relatives, minimal cultural connection, and slow community mobilization, formed a pattern of missed opportunities. Each missed call, each unrecognized cultural detail, and each unexamined relationship added time to an investigation where time mattered most. And the absence of key voices meant investigators moved forward without a complete picture of the children's world. What makes the situation even more significant is that none of these issues existed in isolation. The children's fragmented family structure influenced their cultural disconnect. Their cultural disconnect slowed community involvement. Their lack of community involvement reduced the urgency in early alerts. The absence of early alerts limited the flow of tips and sightings, and that cascade of delays allowed the disappearance to deepen into something far harder to unravel. Yet the story isn't just about missteps. It's also about the opportunities still present. The family, despite its fractures, holds answers embedded in memories, cultural history, personal experiences, and the emotional threads that still tie relatives together. Investigators now understand that the story they must piece together isn't merely about where the children went. It's about who they were in the months and years before they vanished. It's about the relationships that shaped them, the cultural identity that lingered in the background, and the family structures that could hold clues to what happened. This case demonstrates how critical it is for investigators to work with the full scope of a family network, to recognize the power of cultural heritage in mobilizing support, and to understand that every relative, no matter how distant they seem, hold a part of the story. As the search continues, the focus now shifts to rebuilding the investigative foundation that should have been laid from the beginning. It means revisiting relatives who were never contacted, questioning cultural ties that were overlooked, and recognizing the importance of community networks that were never activated early enough. It also means honoring the children's identities, both within their family and within their indigenous heritage, acknowledging that these layers of their lives matter deeply and understanding what led to their disappearance. In the end, this story reminds us that missing person cases unfold far beyond the moment someone is last seen. They are woven through history, family, culture, and community. The children's disappearance has exposed gaps, but it has also illuminated the path investigators must now follow, one that demands attention to every detail, every relative, every cultural thread, and every voice that was once ignored.